Thank you very much. And hi, my name is Hyeonsu, and I'm here to present Paragon, an online gallery for enhancing design feedback with visual examples. This is a project with our collaborators at UC San Diego and University of Toronto. At the core of our project, we consider Design Studio, which is a staple component in design education, where students and design practitioners gather to share their design artifacts and exchange feedback as pictured in this picture. Despite its benefit and popularity, however, it's resource heavy, and as the demand for design education climbs up, one of its core values in providing students the access to quality feedback continues to be short in supply. A number of prior work has also investigated this problem, especially this year at CHI, we had relevant projects on enhancing the feedback quality, two of which are Gabriel et al.'s, I think, is Julia here? Yeah, she's right here. Juxtapeer, which adapts techniques to compare peer examples, and Noon et al.'s Critique It, which explores techniques to provide reusable suggestions and adaptive guidance. Another related work is CrowdCrit, and this by Luther et al. And this work looks at how to scaffold novice online feedback providers with design principles. So our work really specifically builds upon this and explores an approach that uses both expert-created rubrics and supplementary examples to improve the quality of feedback graded by independent judges. So we ask, how might we scale the quantity of design feedback with crowds and improve the quality using rubrics and examples? As we know, many examples are readily available on the web, and so we're interested in understanding if and how we could use these examples in the feedback process to support novice feedback providers. Our approach aims to leverage the people's ability to find relevance among diverse examples, identify, juxtapose useful features, and in order to unlock the unique insights in these design examples. To achieve this, we adopted a form of feedback that uses expository text with supplementary examples. So the high-level research questions we investigate are, can and how online novice feedback providers A, use design examples in feedback, B, give better comparative feedback using examples, and C, guide their search using design metadata. So we ran 2 studies for this investigation. Study 1 uses the first iteration of Paragon, our feedback interface. Here, online feedback providers first reviewed the target design to be critiqued, a gallery of examples that contains different images depending on the experiment condition, a list of expert-created rubrics, and an input to enter the feedback. To show the feasibility of both peer-created and web-collected examples, we created 3 experiment conditions. Control, in which online feedback providers were provided with only the target design and expert-created rubrics to critique. In this case, there was no gallery provided. Content similar, where feedback providers were provided with a gallery of peer-created examples in addition to the target design and the expert-created rubrics. These examples were for the same design task with shared constraints. So content similar means peer-created in study 1, and I use these terms interchangeably. Finally, curated, in which a gallery of web-collected examples were provided instead of peer-created ones. So curated means web-collected, and I also use these terms interchangeably. So how did novice feedback providers use peer-created and web-collected examples? First, examples facilitated new ideas for them. Here on the right, a feedback provider points out the lack of working consistency among different types used in the target design. He then supplements his comment by finding an example that also uses 4 types that he thinks actually work together. Going beyond just the types, he also mentions how the choice of the type matches the broader theme of the design, which is retro. In addition, participants mentioned that the visual nature of examples helped them to show and tell their thoughts. Examples also interacted in 2 different ways with expert-created rubrics. First, participants used examples as references that support specific rubric items. Here on the right, a participant points out the difficulty of reading the title placed vertically from bottom to top in the target design and corroborates this using an example of what she thinks is a better design. And second, the examples interacted more subtly with rubrics. The practice of viewing and comparing examples with the target design in turn shaped the framework which they used to judge the quality of designs. Participants also prefer to have examples when providing feedback, and specifically those that are content similar. When asked why, they commonly mentioned that the matching content made it easier for them to explain why the example worked better. But despite this preference for content-similar examples, however, novice feedback providers were still able to incorporate both types of examples in their feedback. In terms of feedback quality scores, the distribution may suggest a difference. Scores look more normally distributed in the control condition, whereas it seems more positively skewed in the content similar. However, we didn't observe any significant effect by the type of examples on quality scores. In sum, study 1 shows that novice feedback providers can and prefer to use examples with appropriate support in providing feedback, but we failed to show any sign of difference in feedback quality. Moreover, two limitations of this study motivate the design of study 2. First, we know from prior work that it is possible to scaffold the feedback process for novice feedback providers with expert-created rubrics. In study 1, we simply kind of threw in some examples along with rubrics, but we can structure this process a little better than that to support addition of examples on top of the use of rubrics. Second, the size of the corpora was 24, which is fairly small and requires intense manual curation. So in study 2, we'd also like to support example galleries with an increased size. So in study 2, we iterated on the design of Paragon such that participants first view the target design and then select a specific rubric item to provide feedback. They then select examples to associate with the chosen rubrics. While looking for useful examples, feedback providers can use cross-source design filters to guide their search. After leaving the base feedback with supplementary examples, they give explanation of why the chosen examples worked or not worked better in a separate stage. So we use subsets of this interface to form 3 experiment conditions. In control, only the target design and the expert-created rubrics were provided. In the examples condition, a gallery was also provided. Finally, in the examples plus metadata condition, 7 dimensions of crowdsourced design filters were also provided. Study 2 used a between subject setting where 124 online participants were randomly assigned to one of the 3 conditions. The cross-source design filters were in 7 dimensions, including surface features like primary colors of the design and deeper features like the effectiveness of visual layout. After the feedback was collected, we randomly paired 2 pieces of feedback to measure the comparative quality. For example, on the left is shown an example feedback from the control condition, which does not include any supplementary example. On the right is an example feedback from one of the example conditions, which does include a supplementary example in it. Among around 400 pieces of feedback we collected, there were 4,000 pairs that satisfied conditions for meaningful comparison, and we randomly sampled 160 out of this pool and had expert designers blind to condition independently grade them on a scale of 4, 1 meaning the feedback on the left is greatly better, and the 4 meaning the feedback on the right is greatly better. Out of this 160 selected pairs, 107 paired a feedback from the control condition, again, the piece of feedback that does not include a supplementary example in it, and with a piece of feedback that is from either of the example conditions, which does include any number of supplementary examples in that. So did feedback supplemented with examples lead to better quality this time? The result shows that feedback supplemented with examples was better in all 3 dimensions of quality, twice or more as often compared to feedback without examples. Feedback providers wrote longer feedback when supplementing with the examples too, and in a prior work by Krause et al. Found that the length of feedback is positively correlated with perceived quality assessments, which we could also observe in our study. The expert designers thought that the higher quality of feedback when supplemented with examples came from the enhanced descriptiveness, insights, and the different perspectives that examples bring in. So how did supplementing feedback with examples affect time on task? More time was required when people supplemented feedback with examples, but they perceived the amount of compensation similarly fair between the different conditions. Finally, could novice feedback providers use Paragon and crowdsource design filters to find useful examples more efficiently? Some of the participants responded favorably to the filters. For example, they appreciated the ability to quickly reduce down the number of irrelevant design examples using surface-level features like the amount of text or primary colors. They also appreciated being able to interactively browse through a large number of examples. However, we did not find any quantitative difference from using these filters, including the amount of time spent or the ease of choosing examples, etc. Part of the reason we think it was that deeper features, such as the effectiveness of visual hierarchy, was hard to communicate to feedback providers, even though the participants could use the filters to see how examples are categorized interactively. There are also remaining concerns about missing serendipitous discoveries from using these filters. As such, future work remains. Some of the areas that we find exciting are 1, understanding the attributes of useful examples, 2, understanding the relationship between supplementing feedback with examples and the possibility of design fixation, 3, exploring ways to reuse examples and feedback pairs that form dyadic relations in the iterative process of design. So the key takeaways are 1, novice crowds can look for relevance across examples and use them to support feedback. 2, example supplemented feedback was more specific, actionable, and novel judged by experts. 3, more exploration of techniques is necessary to scale the use of examples. And one case in point here is to consider effective filtering versus serendipitous discovery. If you have any question that you don't have a chance to ask during the Q&A session, I'll be around, so you can catch me outside, or please send me an email to hyeonsu@mit.edu. That's hyeonsu@mit.edu, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hyeonsu. Do we have any questions at all? We've got plenty of time for questions. If anyone would like to come to the front, or if anyone can't make it to the front, wave their arms. We will bring a mic to you. Thank you.
From Northumbria University. I was
Hi.
wondering, because I really liked your... yeah. Is that good? Better? Yeah. Okay, so I really liked how you use, for a visual field, also a visual way of giving feedback. And that also that really makes me wonder, why did you use the quantitative evaluation method? Like, was there a specific reason? Because it seems quite like the opposite of what your concept was about.
Okay, that's a really hard question that I don't know if I have the answer to. Well, I think, yes, that we found that it was very difficult to understand the subjective nature of design, which seems to be mostly qualitatively observed. What we were trying to do here was sort of in line with the challenge of kind of scaling this and really to measure the impact of these techniques for a lot of people. And in order to do so, we needed some operationalization of the measures in some ways. And some of the measures, maybe you can say that they might not be representative of the subjective body of research in design, in the field of design, maybe. But we also did not try to really hone down into a very specific kind of measure out of the fear of missing out the context and all. So I think the set of measurements that we chose were relatively around the human behaviors and cognition in design, rather than really kind of reducing it to a certain number, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, perhaps it's also that, like, knowing the audience you try to convince of qualitative methods.
Yes.
Might be the best tool to actually use theirs to convince them that they have to do it differently.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
I've just got one question,
Yes.
as there's no one else there. So, yeah, this is super interesting. I really like really interested in these systems which essentially promote crowdsourcing critique and feedback in design. I suppose, are you thinking about how these types of systems might be used in other types of design disciplines? So obviously you've been focusing on visual communication design there. What would it mean to translate those into, say, industrial design or fashion design or whatever? And also, would they work in those sort of disciplines?
Right. Super interesting question. So kind of a more myopic or kind of a smaller scope view of that question. I think there are two questions. One of them is that in pursuing this research, even we only used in-class examples as opposed to out-of-class examples, if that makes sense. So we were looking at one-page vertical orientation poster design, and as examples, what we only provided to the students were the same kinds of. They all shared the form factor, and basically they were the same kind, right? But one could argue that you can get the inspiration or useful feedback by comparing them with other types of examples, such as films or novels or poems. So I think there is one interesting kind of avenue of future research in that area, and also it's easier to have a static image as an asset to compare in kind of a web page interactively. We are not sure what it means to scale this or open this up for other modalities of designs, but it will be really interesting to look at how to provide that techniques in that domain.
That's great. Thank you very much. And one
Thank you.
last round of applause for that speaker. Thank you, Hyeonsu. So